will be available to view online now and in the future. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Those attending in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Committee members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Right, we'll move on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. Niall, do we have any apologies?
We haven't received any apologies, Chair.
Right, have you? Is Councillor Ashley in the chamber?
He's not, Chair.
No, he's had problems with his IT equipment. He rang me earlier. I think he did try to ring member services, but he couldn't get through, he said.
Okay, I'll note his apologies, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just say he may come in, he rang me, he may come in on his phone. So
yes, he did say that. Yes, he did say that to me, but he wasn't sure whether that would work. So yeah, if he comes in, we'll welcome him. Right, thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Niall, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Yep, no problem, Chair. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Best.
I sit on the Fire Authority.
Yep, that's fine. Councillor Evans.
Same for me on South Wales Fire Authority, yeah.
Yep. Councillor Gordon.
Nothing to declare, thank you.
Councillor Haller.
No interests.
Councillor Gaynor James.
No interests.
Councillor John James.
No interest.
Councillor Jones.
No interest, Niall.
Chair.
Nothing to declare, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Slade.
No interest to declare.
Okay, Councillor Tu.
No interests.
Okay, and Councillor Williams.
Yes, member of Crossy Caerleog and Llanrabban Community Council who were consulted on this.
Okay, that's great. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Niall. Right, we'll go to agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee from the 19th of January 2023. Members, could you possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I'll take them as approved. I can't see anybody. Anyone not in agreement? Anyone wishing to abstain? Right, we're in agreement then. Thank you. Agenda item 4. Planning application 22/P/0446 OUT. Proposed mental health specialist inpatient services unit and associated highway, drainage and landscape infrastructure. Can I ask Mr. Duncan Smith, our consultant planner, to present the report, please?
Good afternoon, Planning Committee. Move on to the next slide. Here's a site plan of the proposal, and a couple of things on this. Firstly, I'll be referring to, for reasons that will become apparent, to the land owned by Aneurin Bevan, and essentially that is land within the Llanfrecffer Grange site, and I'm running my cursor around it at the moment. I'll refer to that as the AB land, and I'll refer to this bit of land, which is half of an agricultural field, that I'll refer to as the WG land, Welsh Government land. So the land is in two ownerships, but there is another important reason for making that distinction, and I'll come to that in a moment. Just another thing to point out, There are two accesses proposed to this site. You'll see I'm going to run my cursor along the lines now, that one and that one. The top one is the existing access, it's intended to improve, to create an access to the MHU. I'll refer to it, the proposal as the MHU throughout, which will go on to the site here. And that's the permanent access. They're also proposing to put a temporary access in here. My cursor's running along it now, and that crosses a grassed area on the site. And the reason for that is to keep the construction traffic away from the main hospital site. So if we move on to the next slide, this is an aerial of the site, and you'll see the Grange University Hospital here is where I've got my cursor now. We come down to the very south of the site. The AB land and Iron Bevan land is in here, and the WG, Welsh Government land, is in here. So if we move on to the next slide, this sets out the proposal, and very broadly, I'm going to come to the layout of the site, etc., at the end. But this sets out for you the various services that are going to be provided on the site. And if we move on to the next slide, essentially, the Health Board have put forward a case for using this site, and they've given three principal reasons. The first reason is that it will provide a centralised point within the AHB area, which is a former Gwent area, if you look at that. I'm just going back in time. When we looked for hospital sites, we were asked to look for one in Torfaen, because and particularly Cwmbran, because it provided a central location for people who wanted to use that service. So one of the first criteria was that they got a central location. What they're doing here is bringing services at the moment dispersed throughout the area. St Cadoc's principally, which is in the south, and Mayndiff Court near Abergavenny, which is in the north. So they're looking to bring all those services together onto one centrally located site. Secondly, they argue that providing mental health services on a health site that covers a range of other illnesses is good, in that it destigmatizes mental health. And finally, there are clinical reasons why co-location with the Grange Hospital makes sense in clinical terms. And those are set out in my report. So they're the principal reasons that they want to use this site. If we go on to the next slide, the Health Board have produced a master plan for the site, which accompanied an outline business case, which has been presented to Welsh Government, principally built around siting a Medipark. That's an industrial uses that would go onto the site, that would live closely to the hospital and serve it. And as part of that, they produced a master plan for the site. This was supported by the council. In fact, it was approved by Cabinet back in 2020. And on that plan, and if you follow my cursor now, the proposal was to put just one of the units that I set out earlier, the low secure unit, in this location here, which is approximately where the proposal, in terms of the AB land at least, would be located. Adjacent to that, car parking. So it was locating just simply one of the functions that are now included in the larger proposal. I'll come back to that in a moment. So if we move on. Also, the site lies within the area, the Llanfretford Strategic Action Area, which was in the preferred strategy approved by Council as part of the renewal of the LDP. And the site is subsumed into both of those proposals, if you like. Now I'm going to make a caveat. Neither of those proposals have a strong material basis in planning. They've not been formally adopted. So, if we move on to the next slide, we have to look at the local plan. That's the main consideration today in terms of the location of this unit, despite the fact there are those wider plans. This is the local plan, and you'll see that the site lies, and follow my cursor again, please. The AB land is roughly where my cursor is at the moment, and the Welsh Government land is where my cursor is now. So the distinction is that the AB land lies within a strategic action area in the plan, so it's in the urban boundary. The Welsh Government land lies outside. It's outside the urban boundary. Two other things to just note on this plan. The AB land, as well as being outside the urban boundary, is included within a much wider area, and it essentially covers the whole of the area to the east of Cwmbran here, going down to Pontier. So it's part also of a special landscape area identified in the plan. So they're the considerations you've got to take into account. The other issue is that as part of the strategic action area, a relief road is planned to Llanfrecffa, basically a bypass to Cullean Road. So it takes the traffic off that stretch of Cullean Road, which is quite narrow, I'm sure you know it. Trees on the one side, houses on this side, very narrow stretch of road. And the proposal is, in the longer term at least, to put a relief road in that location. And essentially, the mental health unit, the MHU, doesn't impinge on that. The temporary road that's proposed, though, does impinge on that, and I'll come to that in a moment. So, taking those local plan policy considerations into account, and I'm going to run through each of them and give my advice, I suppose. First, the black, the highlighted is the policy, and the non-highlighted is my comment on that policy, and I'll just run through it. The AB land is allocated in a strategic action area. So the principle of development on that site is acceptable. It's within the urban boundary. It's acceptable to put this onto this site. In terms of the Welsh Government land, however, it lies in open countryside. It's outside the urban boundary in the LDP. Under those circumstances, policy S1 applies in the LDP, and essentially that policy defers to national policy. It says national policy should be taken into account. So if we go to the third bullet point, the national policy is essentially Planning Policy Wales and Technical Advice Note 6. I've missed the 6 off there, I do apologise. And neither of those preclude development. However, they do make very strong provisos in terms of what you should take into account. And I'm quoting here from Planning Policy Wales, which says that proposals that breach the urban boundary should be located within or adjoining the urban boundary. There should be minor extensions may be acceptable. And finally, you can demonstrate that the proposal increases economic activity. Now, my advice to you is on each of those counts that this proposal meets those criteria. If we move on to the next slide, let's now look at the relief road, and I think I've covered that. It's temporary, it will be removed, and it doesn't get in the way of putting the relief road in, and the MHU itself does not impinge on that. So in terms of that policy issue there. The road isn't prejudiced. In terms of the special landscape area and the agricultural land, we're talking two things on this second bullet point. First is the loss of agricultural land. Second is impinging into a special landscape area. In terms of the agricultural land, we're talking about 2.44 hectares of lower grade agricultural land. So it's not important. Agricultural, well, all land is important, but it's less important than grades 1 and 2. And in terms of the SLA, I showed you the size of the SLA. It's pretty large. And this is a very small proportion of that, and it lies next to the urban boundary. So on each of those counts, again, my advice is that it's acceptable to develop the Welsh Government land on that basis. Move on to the next slide. We're on to the final slide there. So there are other issues that must be taken into account. I think from the policy standpoint, my advice is that this is acceptable to go onto this slide. This is an outline application with all matters reserved. So we get indicative layouts and we get site parameters that are put forward to us. We condition that, and then details come in at the reserved matters stage. The key issue here, I felt, with design and access. Do they work? In terms of overall design, the MHU is largely single-storey. Clinical advice that's set out by Welsh Government is that these sorts of services should be provided at ground floor level, that you shouldn't have levels up. There is a small element of the building at the front that is two-storey. That's mainly admin and reception. All of the other units are single-storey. Those are single-storey and they're around courtyards, so they're safe and safe space for each of those units for people to get out, but not get away. It's single-storey. So in terms of the visuals on this one, bearing in mind that the hospital is 5 stories, you can see that from all over the place. You won't see this because it's low-lying. In terms of the properties on Caerleon Road, there's a strong tree screen along there that protects them from views into the site. So from a design point of view, in terms of the materials that have been put forward, I'm satisfied that they are acceptable. In terms of access, we've had no objections from highways or Welsh Government roads. Welsh Government roads were consulted because this eventually feeds out very quickly onto the main trunk road. Neither have raised objections to the proposal. In terms of ecology, we had submissions after the original submission covering issues that were raised by ecology and landscape, and those have been addressed. Principally, they were buffers to the ancient woodland that lies to the east, and also accommodation, more information on bats, and essentially protection for bats. That's all covered by condition. In terms of drainage, it can be drained, the site can be drained satisfactorily, and we've got no objections on that count. And finally, contamination and noise. There is contamination on the site. There's asbestos on the northern part of the site. Obviously, that will have to be dealt with, and that will be conditioned should you grant consent. Thank you, Chairman. That's my presentation.
Thank you for that, Duncan. That was a comprehensive view of that. Thank you. I can see one hand up. Are there any hands up in the chamber now?
It's Gary, Chair. Yes, Councillors Gordon and Williams have both got their hands up in the chamber.
Right. Would they like to go first? Whichever put their hand up first.
Well, then I'll jump in. Thank you, Chair. I should say at the outset I'm the ward councillor as well for that covers this particular planning application. I've got two questions which are very different if I ask them both, and then you can take them or sort of deal with them as you like. It says within the report that there's 144 car parking spaces, and based on whatever parameters you would use, that's a shortfall of 19 car parking spaces for this facility. If you speak to anybody who lives along Cullion Road and the housing areas immediately adjacent to the site, parking is a massive problem, and those estates, those streets are being used as an overflow. I know from personal experience, because I'm a Unison official and I visit the Grange Hospital for work purposes on a fairly regular basis. Parking is completely horrendous. So the question I would ask is, why is there a shortfall in car parking spaces, and can we put a condition on there that it's a prerequisite that those spaces are provided, because it just exacerbates an existing problem for my residents who live sort of immediately adjacent to the site. The second question I have is around the B4232, or it's called the B Road, which we're setting up on a temporary basis and then regrassing, if I'm understanding that correctly. My question doesn't necessarily relate specifically then, in that case, to this planning application, but I wonder if anybody would take a view on whether the announcement by Welsh Government a couple of days ago about the suspension of road building or road improvement activities would have a medium to long-term effect on the provision of the B Road, which diverts traffic from Cullion Road, because, as you say, it's very narrow, it's very kind of, we've had problems with speeding and all the rest of it. And just on top of that, if I beg the indulgence of the Chair, we have all sorts of problems with increased traffic from the Grange Hospital going through Lanfrecffer and Pontier, using Crown Road as a bit of a rat run, which they shouldn't really be doing. This just exacerbates that problem. I know that would potentially be alleviated in September with sort of the TCBC WAG introduction of the 20 mile an hour limit, but has that fully been sort of, we've taken full cognizance of the traffic implications on the surrounding parts of the ward, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Duncan, do you want to answer that? Was there someone from Highways there that could do it?
I'm okay, Chairman, if you want me to.
Yes, please.
I do explain in my report that the car parking standards, as applies to health service, are a little bit. There's one standard, and it doesn't break down what you're doing. Essentially, it's based on bed units. And essentially, the argument put to us by the applicant is that predominantly this hospital will deal with inpatients rather than outpatient, and therefore the need is not as great in terms of the amount of car parking that's required. I did take this up with the planning with the highways officer, and they were satisfied that overall there wouldn't be a problem. I think in terms of this versus the university hospital, and this is a general comment applying to everything here, it's the university hospital that is causing the issues, and this will be pretty marginal in terms of any overall significant effect. Although, if you look at the report, they are one of the 106 agreement is that they contribute to a study of active travel linkages into the site, and I think that's essential. I think I use the word retrofitted. I think they're being retrofitted in terms of the hospital itself, which is causing problems, particularly on the roundabout, with people on the trunk road crossing it. So I would say that we're satisfied that this won't exacerbate car parking problems in there. Although we can bring the issue up with the health board that you've brought this up and asked them to do that, I think we haven't got much of a stick to make them do that based on what I've just said. In terms of the Welsh Government roads announcement yesterday and the relief road, I think the good news is that it wasn't rejected. And it's still on the cards, and I think the leader of the council is part of a group that will be looking at that, and hopefully it will bear fruit, because I think this one has got good argument behind it for why it ought to be done. So that's still on the table. It hasn't been taken off the table, and I do make the point in my report, because some residents ask, can't you put the relief road in now? Well, it would be ideal if we could, but this level of development would not fund that. And so we can't ask for that at the moment. All we can do is protect the line, which I think we've done of that road. And if wider development does occur at that location, there'll become a point when that development should fund it. So that's not off the cards. I said earlier, I know the residents have got problems, and I think they largely result from the university hospital itself, rather than will result from this in terms of the effect it would have. I think that it would be marginal overall in terms of what's going on at that location. I know there are issues on Crown Road. I know there are issues around the site, and I think the study that I mentioned, and we would be working with the health board on that, should hopefully come up with some solutions to those problems that are being felt by the residents. I hope that answers your question.
To an extent, yeah, and I'm grateful for the response. What I would say is, the health board have assured you that, you know, parking won't be a problem. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? Because there is a fundamental issue. This isn't anecdotal, this is real life experience. There's a real problem, albeit caused by the university hospital, the main body of the hospital itself, but there is massive overspill parking on Cullion Road and the surrounding areas, which isn't going away. So, but I nevertheless accept your response on that, and I'm grateful to you. When we talk about the B road, that's still not wiped off according to the Welsh Government. But, and again, this is a longer term question which might not be appropriate for this meeting, but is it envisaged that the bulk of Section 106 monies for the potential housing development, which largely go to fund the sort of installation, if you like, of the new B road, the new sort of shortcut, if you like?
The easy answer to that is unknown at this moment, at this point in time. However, the RLD, the LP, has identified that area as being suitable for basically a new settlement. So one would expect that the combination of development on that site, if it were to proceed, remember we're in early days yet on that, it would be part of that whole funding proposal. It's not a huge stretch of road, to be honest with you, but building any stretch of road is a lot of money. So you need those houses, you need that quantum of development to get that sort of proposal in. So, you know, still unknown, I've got to say that, but that's if development happened at that location. It's in the local plan. It's in the current local plan. It will be in the preferred strategy as it goes forward. If it goes forward in its current form, it's in there. So, yes, I'd say that further development there would have to fund it. Thank you.
All right, Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Duncan, too. I'll take Steve Evans next. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. where you said in the report that agricultural loss of land is nothing to be worried about, what concerns me are we as Torbine members are put in for climate emergency, same as the Welsh Government. Yet what I'm concerned about is what mitigation we're doing to cover a lot of this green belt land and agricultural land, because we seem to allow in all these developments and everything else, same as Welsh Government, yet we seem to be with the mitigation very limited in our response. Can anybody answer that for me?
Right, can you answer that, Duncan?
Yeah, I'll come in on that point.
Thank you.
I think what I'm saying here, and it is taken very seriously. I'll preface what I'm saying is in that any loss over 20 hectares, you must consult with the NRW and Welsh Government. In this instance, we're talking about 1.44 hectares. And I mentioned earlier that land is the lowest grade. As a background, when I started my presentation, I explained that quite a lot of that land this council has said could go for a new settlement. So, although that's not planning policy at the moment, bear that in mind. So any loss of agricultural land has to be thought about very carefully. But I think you've got to weigh that against the benefits that this will bring. And I think the benefits are pretty substantial in terms of the location, the clinical benefits, and, those two, basically. So I think we've balanced this, and we've thought very carefully about it before putting this recommendation to you. And it would be my recommendation in this instance that loss of land and that loss of SLA, Special Landscape Area, is acceptable in this instance.
I come back in, Chair, but what are we doing to mitigate that loss? That's the most important bit.
Well,
we're doing it, but what are we doing to mitigate that loss?
There is a loss of 2 trees in this development. There's a loss of a hedge line as well. And we would expect within the, and I do say this in my report, that the enhancements to landscaping will exceed what's on the site at the moment in terms of what they bring in onto the site. So there is mitigation in there. You can't mitigate the loss of agricultural land. Once it's lost, it's lost. But in this instance, I'm saying against the background of the arguments I put up earlier, that it is acceptable in this particular instance.
Okay, Steve. Thank you,
Yeah,
Duncan.
thank you.
Yeah. Who else is in the chamber with questions, Geraint?
Councillor Williams, Chair.
Right, I'll have Councillor Williams next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, firstly, that one of the points I was going to make, my colleague has raised, which is about the roads, so I won't make that again. A couple of observations as well as a question. So I think the observation is that it was very beneficial to see that there was consideration of EV provision and disabled parking in the overall parking arrangements, because we've noted that kind of requirement before. Secondly, it was also positive to see the contribution towards active travel, and thank you for the explanation around that. One would assume that that wouldn't be dependent on completion of works, but could be done before, or as part of the phasing of that. Small question, really, which was actually, obviously, you outlined that a proportion of the development is on Welsh Government-owned land, and we've seen this comment from the Transport Department, but are we assured that the release of that land is in train, or has happened, so that the development can go ahead? That doesn't actually state that anywhere, and I was just asking what the process is for that. And finally, it was just to sort of reinforce a couple of comments from my colleague, Councillor Evans. I think we can perhaps emphasise that we would look favourably on the detailed environmental mitigation measures once the development is in place, because I think that actually enhances the mental health for those people who are actually there. And I think it's helpful to make that observation. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Duncan,
Sorry, Chair.
could you answer, please?
In terms of there's one question in there, I think, and it was whether the Welsh Government land is en route.
Correct.
I understand the business case for this proposal is going to be submitted in March to Welsh Government, and I understand from talking to the not the applicants but their agents that Welsh Government are content to do a deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones, would you like to come in with a question?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the questions have already been addressed and answered, but one question I've got is, if approval is given, what sort of timescale are we looking at, please? Any indication?
It's not in our hands. I mentioned that the outline business case will be submitted, so I understand it, in March. This is going to cost quite a lot of money. So I would imagine, I can't answer your question, is the answer. We would have to, that would be Welsh Government funding being available, I think. So I can't give you an answer. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, Janet, thank you. I can see another hand up. It's from the floor, I think, in the chamber.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Gaynor-James would like to come in, please.
Right. Would you like to do a question now, Gaynor?
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, but I think this is a very, very thorough application, and I think Torfaen is lucky to be able to have the Grange, to be able to have this unit in, and I say I approve this.
Thank you, Gaynor. Are there any other questions or comments from members? Right. So, could somebody now make a proposal?
Yeah, I propose, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Niall, could you please ask members now in alphabetical order to state whether they are for, against or abstaining this application?
Hi, Chair. Is Geraint again?
All right.
I'll take it, no problem. Right,
Thank you.
Right, if I can start with Councillor Best, please.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For Wickedish.
Councillor Gordon.
For.
Councillor Haller.
For.
Councillor Gaynor-James.
For.
Councillor John James.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Yourself, Chair.
For.
Councillor Slade.
No.
For.
Councillor Tew.
For.
And Councillor Williams.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Geraint. So this planning application has been approved. Right, I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and your contributions today, and I'll close the meeting.